What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 169 of the Eye of the Storm podcast. My name is David Barrow, and Monday night, in front of a sold-out crowd, it was as much of a celebration as it was a loud announcement to the Big East Conference as well as the country that St. John's is back, and they're coming with firepower this season. For a second straight year, they hosted a game in Queens against the Quinnipiac Bobcats, a night that saw banners unveiled high atop Carnesecca Arena to commemorate last season's Big East Conference crown, as well as the Big East tournament title. It also saw the number 5 team in the country kickstart their season with a win. The Johnnies looked the part in the first game of the season, scoring 54 points in each half, led by Dillon Mitchell and Zuby Ejiofor. It was a superb effort against a team picked to win the MAC conference in the Bobcats. Simply put, Monday night, they looked like a top 5 team in the country. They looked like a Big East title contender. They looked like a team that should be firmly in the conversation for a deep run in March. I'm joined once again by Justin Kramer. Justin, it was about as perfect of a night as you can ask for. From the opening ceremonies with the banners being unveiled to Rick Pitino telling the crowd that, quote, we're all after the biggest prize of all, not just Big East title rings, but the big one for that national championship. It was a game that saw them score the most points since 2021 when they scored 119 against the woeful and perpetually last place Ken Palmed Mississippi Valley State. For me, Justin, the telltale sign that this was going to be a good night was right out of the gate. Ian Jackson goes right to the rim for an easy layup. Follow that up with a three-pointer. Dillon Mitchell hook shot. Zuby Ejiofor for a two-handed rim rattler. And poof, in a blink of an eye, it was 19-4, timeout. And, well, the game was basically over. Your initial thoughts from a super fun night in Queens that saw St. John score 108 points.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Dave. This game was over in many ways before it started. When Pitino took the court and announced not only to Johnny Nation but to the world that their eyes are on a much bigger prize this year. I knew they were not losing this game. Now, to be fair, credit to Quinnipiac. This is a team that's actually picked to win the MAC, a conference that has won games in the NCAA tournament, a conference that has won games out of conference against Big East opponents in the past. This is a good Quinnipiac basketball team. Now, obviously, the real test is going to be this Saturday at Madison Square Garden, but don't be fooled. This is a good Quinnipiac basketball team who's going to win a lot of games this year. However, this St. John's team had no problem with them whatsoever, and the game was over, as you said. Once that first timeout was called by Pecora, you just knew that you could kind of sit back, relax, and enjoy this one. My overall thoughts, in short, the depth of this team is going to impose its will on a lot of teams. Not only were the starters and many of the reserves out with about 6 minutes to go in the game, but the reality is when that second team took the floor, the lead got bigger and bigger. And at one point, I think Quinnipiac actually cut it to about 14 or 15, and then the second team just had that below right back to 21 points. The depth of this St. John squad is nothing short of extraordinary.
You know, you talk about the game being over and us kind of being able to kick our feet up. And, well, the last 2 years, we've kind of been able to do that. But, you know, you look back in the last 15 years, man, there haven't been too many laughers, especially in, Carnesecca Arena has been a very home-friendly gym for St. John's, and obviously they play most of their bye games there. But just in general, as a St. John's fan, we know more than anybody that, especially some of those early games where you're working out the kinks. I mean, we're not far away from a Vince Cole three-pointer with time basically expiring. That again, that would have been a brutal quad 4 loss. That was, I think, 2020, maybe 19. But my goodness, like, it is nice to kind of not have to worry and not have to, be peeking up and doing some math and be like, all right. Instead, you're like, what was the spread? 24 and a half. Oh, we're winning by 45 points. Cool. Very different, obviously a very good vibe. Justin, to me, the first thing that I really thought of when, just thinking about the game on the car ride home, very aesthetically pleasing game to watch. The offense, obviously when you score 108 points, is looking good, but it was the way that the buckets were being scored, right out of the gate. I mentioned the 19-4, but man, it was three-pointer, three-pointer, dunk, layup. Like just a it just looked really, really good the way guys were moving. And what's funny, and Justin, we talked after the Towson exhibition game. We see each other at halftime. It's like after the Towson exhibition game, everybody's like, "Oh, God, man, these guys like, all right, we got a lot to work on." And that was what, October 18th, and it's November 4th when we're recording this. And my God, the two teams couldn't look any different. The St. John's team that took the floor on Monday night was a far cry from what we saw against Towson.
Yeah, I'll say, and if the development continues at this pace, there are exciting times ahead. What really stood out to me though, was the fact that this team took good shots. They didn't force anything. They either took threes or they were at the basket. You didn't see any of those long Phil Green 2-pointers, which he seemed to make, but drove me nuts as a fan watching those 19-foot 2-point shots, which are like the worst shot in college basketball. I was really pleased with the shot selection by and large, and I thought that was the biggest testament to that was the efficiency in which they scored. They scored 108 points, but they did it on, just a really nice shooting performance. 39 of 69 from the field, 8 of 19 from three. They left some points at the charity stripe, but by and large, they made their shots. And I guess that's going to happen when you're basically dunking everything or having wide open looks with a team like this. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. And we talk about efficient, we talk about good shots. Somebody that I think took a lot of good shots, but I guess didn't really translate into the score, box score at the end was Dillon Darling, who I thought played well, but was 1 of 6 from the floor. But he added 4 boards, 6 assists, 3 steals. Didn't take any bad shots. He missed a few of the threes, which I understand, but then he switched his only make. That's something that Rick Pitino notes, and you're going to hear from Rick Pitino in a bit here. But let's just talk about the guards in general because the efficiency, and you want to talk about being efficient, you don't get better than 6 of 6. And that was Ian Jackson. Ian Jackson was perfect. I tweeted a little bit tongue in cheek after the game that Ian Jackson leads the country in field goal percentage, and he leads the country in 3-point percentage because, well, you can't get higher than 100%. So factually accurate. But one of the big things that I wanted to see, and I know you did too, was how does Ian Jackson bounce back? Obviously we've talked about it. 2 games now. Ian Jackson in the exhibition didn't look great. Was a cause of concern for the fan base or myself. You said it as well, but we always, backtrack that with we know he's going to figure it out. Obviously, way too talented not to. And then what happens? The first play of the game, he turns the ball over, and everybody's like throwing their hands up. God, you know what? Here we go again. Ian still can't find it. 2 seconds later, gets to the rim, nice and easy layup. 2 seconds later, hits a three, 5-0, St. John's. Ian Jackson got the first 5 points, feeling great. He then picks up 2 fouls. And anybody that's been paying attention, Rick Pitino, in the first half, if you pick up 2 fouls, you're going to the bench. He does not want you to pick up that third foul. So that kind of took some of the wind out of the sails for a great start from Ian Jackson. But overall, he got picked up because Josan Sanon had a strong first half, which continued in the second. And he looked good against Michigan, against with the foul trouble. But the guard play overall looked awesome. Sanon, Jackson, Darling off the bench. Sanon and Darling off the bench. Jackson and Sellers started. The 4 of them combined for 41 points, 13 of the team's 25 assists, which was huge, something that we've been looking for with the guards. I thought Josan Sanon looked great off the bench, and his offense looks like a professional basketball player, like NBA type style. We'll talk about that more in a bit. I mentioned how Darling filled up the stat sheet as well. Your thoughts on what we saw from Ian Jackson? Again, yes, we know it's Quinnipiac. We know that this is technically a bye game, but as Justin mentioned, they were picked to win the MAC. This is a good team. Amari Monroe was great. Their guard, Knight, was awesome in that game, led their scoring with 19. But you still got to play the game. You still got to do what you do, and you need to get ready for Alabama. And I thought that the guards, who will have a monster test on Saturday with Alabama's guards, answered the bell and were phenomenal.
The guards needed a bounce back performance after the exhibition games, especially going into Alabama. Like you said, that is going to be a real test for our backcourt. Um, Darling, more than anybody, I think, played his ass off. He drew another charge. He did the same thing against a Michigan.
I was going to bring that up.
Defensively, he has been better than advertised, and quite frankly, has kind of alleviated some of the concerns that people had about his ability to stay on the court and
For
stay
sure.
out of foul trouble.
For sure. I think we're going to keep a Dillon Darling charge counter up all season somewhere on the video or like in my office because
I love it.
I feel like he's good for at least one a game.
And he's been consistent with that. 4 defensive rebounds. And Patino talked before this game
Mhm.
about the importance of the
Absolutely.
guards crashing the boards, and Darling did just that. And to say nothing of the fact that he was a floor general out there. He was distributing, he was getting guys good looks, and I think that is part of the reason why their field goal percentage was so high, because he was getting them the ball in positions where they could either dunk it or lay it in for an easy basket. So nothing but praise for Darling. Jackson was interesting. Jackson played under 15 minutes, but scored 15 points on 6 of 6 shooting, like you mentioned. But when I left Carnesecca Arena, I said, I don't think Jackson had a great overall game. I think he had a very nice offensive game.
Mhm.
I think that the turnover left a bad taste in my mouth to start the game. And defensively, he was okay. But the reality is, I feel like he could do more. And maybe that's not fair to the kid, but this is a kid who can, because of his athleticism, I expect him to get steals. I expect him to get rebounds. And it's not fair in a sense, because his 15 points that he quickly scored are a testament to his gifted offensive abilities. But I want to see more of a well-rounded game for him. But what jumped out to me more than anything else between him and Sanon's shot, not only is it pure, not only is it beautiful to watch, but they have a quick release, like an NBA flick it up and get it into the hoop. Um, that is going to be extremely dangerous as teams focus on our interior play, and with good reason. And we'll get to them later. But what stood out to you most about our guard play? Was it Darling's game, or was it just the offensive ability of Jackson Sanon, scoring 29 points between the two of them?
I loved what I saw from Joson Sanon. Joson was the way that he could score at all three levels. I thought my first thought is, boy, not only does he have a quick trigger, like you said, but he is not shy about letting that thing go because he gets it and he is looking to score. And like to me, like when he is in that kind of mode, I see NBA style offense from him. Now, that leads me to a bigger point, and a lot of the things that you just said sound like the St. John's head coach. So while Ian Jackson did lead the team in plus minus, Rick Pitino is still trying to push some buttons here. Rick Pitino is still trying to get more out of Ian Jackson. Yeah, it was great to see the offense. And to me, I'm going to take that and run with it because I was really excited. And I think that the biggest thing for him right now is just to get that confidence, especially going into Saturday's game against Alabama. He needed to kind of wash away the poor play against Towson and Alabama. So to see him not only make a few threes, get a few easy baskets, but go perfect from the floor. Yeah, he only played a small amount of minutes because of the foul trouble. And like, if you want to point to anything negative, I think it's that. I wasn't too disappointed with the defense. Again, it's who he's defending also. But I wanted to see him get confidence, to get that swagger. And I think that going 6 of 6 in your first game in front of a sold out building checks all those boxes.
No question. There were 2 guys on this team that I think needed to show up and basically get that confidence going. Ian Jackson was one of them. The other one was Oziyah Sellers, and unfortunately, he led the guards in minutes played. He played just under 24 minutes. I think he was largely invisible. And that is not to say that the best is not yet ahead for this kid, but in this particular game, very nice from the charity stripe. Missed his only 2 3-point attempts and was 1 for 4 from the field, but he was largely quiet. And I I was wondering if you noticed that as well.
For
What did
sure.
you think of Oziyah Sellers' game rounding out that backcourt?
It's the thing that we've talked about a few times now is it seems like Ozai is still trying to find his way, figure out where he fits in this offense. For last year, he was the guy that was getting his own shot, that he was getting set up for the threes. Right now, he's not being used that way. And I think it's still a work in progress. Obviously, everybody knows that he's a great 3-point shooter, and so the questions that come out of this game is like, well, we need to get Ozai going, especially because when you look at the 3-point numbers, you take 42% from three every day of the week. They were phenomenal, 8 of 9 behind the 3-point line, but that 19 attempts to me is low. And you want to see higher volume. The type of basketball that's played these days is such a high volume 3-point shooting team. And when you're gonna what you're going up against on Saturday is a very good 3-point shooting team in Alabama and a team that shoots it a ton. So you're going to have to try and keep pace. Now, you can't sacrifice bad shots just to shoot them. So that's good. You're obviously taking good shots, Justin. You mentioned that at the beginning. They were efficient and they were taking good shots. So I didn't see chucks. I didn't see bad threes, off balance threes, step backs. Ian Jackson took a step back, but he made it. And it wasn't like a bad shot. So you take 42%, you take 8 of 19, but like Oziyah should be good for about 5 or 6 of those takes. And, so far he hasn't been, a catalyst of that. I think it's just one of those things that, like, all right, you want to look for a negative in a game like this. It's his role, and it's still, I think he's just trying to find his footing. And I think that St. John's has this gluttony of guards who, one, have to play, and you got to find the minutes for it. And that's where I was going to go to next. And two, he's kind of bouncing around between the 1 and the 2. So is Ian. So is Joe Sons. Like Joe Son was bringing the ball up. Dillon was bringing the ball up. Oziyah brought the ball up. So I think it's just a balance, and you got to find it. And again, if you want to point to one thing that you're still scratching your head about, it's like, all right, they got to figure out what to do with Oziyah.
Yeah, and again, we may be nitpicking here, but that's because A, that's what we do, and B, this wasn't an A+ effort. There is room for growth and room for things that can be better. That is one of those things. But I
Yeah.
spoke briefly about the depth earlier. I think you're going to see games this year where on any given night, one of 7 or 8 guys are going to come out and just carry the team on their back. What you're not going to see is a guy score 35 points. And that's just because there's too many guys on this team that demand the ball, put up good shots, and can score. So when you're looking at guys like Dillon Mitchell in the front court who had 18 points and 7 rebounds, what he did was nothing short of remarkable given the fact that he didn't take 30 shots. The guy took 9 shots and he had 18 points. The efficiency again is the word of the day. But even guys like Io off the bench, and I want to give a shout out to Io.
Great
I
game.
don't think that there's a guy on this team that I feel more comfortable with on the court than Io. And I say that because no matter what he does, you just know he's not going to make the wrong play. He's going to make the smart decision. He's going to take the good shots. He's going to give the ball up when he has to. He's not going to turn it over. He is a glue guy for this team and one of the most um, comfortable guys on the court, especially because he knows Pitino's system and all that, no doubt about it. But when he comes into the game, you don't just expect him to be out there, you expect him to make a difference.
He looks so much better. He looks more comfortable on the court. He looks more confident on the court, and he's put on some muscle. He looks better on the court. But you kind of think back to when he was kind of like a throw-in addition to this roster when Rick Pitino first came here. And, all we really heard about Sadiq was that, oh man, Rick loves him and he's just like a great captain kind of guy. And then he gets named captain late in the year. And you're like, all right, well, like what? I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's like he didn't really play much. So it's like, all right, this is guy's just like a cheerleader on the bench. And then you saw like little glimpses of him being used, and he has improved. There was a game I keep bringing up. Like I said, I always remember it's a DePaul game last year where he scores 15 points in the first half, and it's like, oh man, like this guy can do something. But in the preseason, he's looked really serviceable. And then yesterday on Monday night at Cornerstone Arena, he was dunking the hell out of the ball. He was getting to the rim. He hit a three with utmost confidence. and he plays hustle defense. He will talk, he will call out where everybody needs to be. He's the first guy off the bench to get a guy up or to cheer or to high five somebody. He is the most quintessential amazing teammate. And now he's getting, I want to say, rewarded with it by getting a shot on the court, because this guy is very much in this rotation and he's like your seventh, eighth man at this point.
Yeah, and he deserves to be. And like
Mhm.
I said, when he comes out there, he's not just going out there with a bunch of guys that can't play. The second team is obviously a quality team. I mean, you
Yeah.
had Sanon off the bench yesterday. That should tell you everything you need to know. But when Io was in the game, it's almost like a warm blanket. You're just very
Yeah.
comfortable with him on the court.
Ian and Josan both to me looked like shooting guards. And what I want to talk about here is really the guard depth. We'll go back to the depth question and conversation, because it's very interesting right now and coming off game one is so how great this front court was Bryce, Zuby, Mitchell. They're going to be playing a lot together, it seems like, which leaves you two spots. And Ian's going to have to play a lot. Josan's going to have to play a lot. You're going to figure out and find out where Sellers is going to go. Darling's going to be playing a lot. You got to factor in Io. You got to get Lefty in that game because he was on the bench for most of the game, came in, hits a three. Like, you got to play some of these guys. St. John's is 10, 11 deep easy. First world problems, great problem to have, but you got to find the balance here. And it's very interesting because I think everybody was on the ball kind of yesterday. There wasn't one main guy. Darling led the team with the assist, which was great. But like, Ian was a great scoring option yesterday. Josan was a great scoring option yesterday. And they're two guys that are going to fill the guard spot. So like, this is, I think, going to be one of the big question marks for the season. And it's not necessarily do they have a point guard? It's like, do they have the time to allot to figure out who gets what spot? And obviously, it's always situational, and it's going to be foul trouble, which is something that is continuing to plague St. John's and the guards. But it's a great problem to have, and I think that that's something that we really should watch for in Saturday's game against Alabama. Who gets what minutes? What situation are certain guys in? Obviously the bench is cleared with 6 minutes to go. You got the crowd and bench going absolutely bonkers for Fotis. Even Rick Pitino was cracking a smile and laughing when Fotis came in and hit a three. Everybody was, you would have thought that like 20 celebrities walked into the building. It was incredible. That's I think quite the again, good problem to have, but I think that it's something that we gotta have to monitor. And I'm so curious how the guards are going to be kind of broken up and used against Alabama.
Rick Pitino jokes about the 500 starting lineups that you see during a season, but what he was also saying without actually saying it is that the minute distribution is going to change over time. And so the team that we saw last night is not going to be the same minute distribution against Alabama, and it won't be the same minute distribution that you see at Villanova later this year.
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to believe that in a game that's going to matter and it's probably going to be tighter, that you're only going to have guys that play 26 minutes max, which nobody was over that.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. He's going to tighten the rotation, and I expect that to happen as early as this Saturday. I don't think they're going to beat Alabama by 40 points. Otherwise, we're having a very, very different discussion over the weekend, and bring me back down to earth at that point. But kidding aside, you're going to see Zuby play 23 minutes. He's not playing 23 minutes against
No,
Alabama. None of these guys are
unless
going to
he's
be
in
playing.
horrendous foul trouble, obviously.
God forbid. Don't even put that
Right.
out there. But you mentioned the front court, and I think we should pivot to them because we have not really talked much about the front court. On paper, that three-headed monster of Mitchell, Hopkins, and Ejiofor, you knew had the ability to wreak havoc. And yet, for some reason, I feel like they're only scratching the surface. We know what Zuby is. We are starting to see what Mitchell is. And in his own way, Bryce Hopkins played a hell of a game. He only took 5 shots, but he had 8 points. He had 5 assists. He had a steal. He had 4 rebounds. He was all over the place. Missed some free throws. So we'll get to that. But your thoughts on this front court, which is seems every bit as good as advertised.
We've said that it's going to be the strength of this team, which is crazy when you've got five-star kids and Ian Jackson, Joson Sanon, and 40% three-point shooter in Oziyah Sellers, things like that. Big Sky Player of the Year in Dillon Darling. But this front court is insane. And I've said from the jump that I think that not only are they the best front court in the Big East, but I think that they're giving anybody a run for their money in the country. Now, Zuby picked up right where he left off last year. He looked like Big East Player of the Year. Just dunks, rebounds, great passing, great chemistry, I thought, with Bryce Hopkins in the low post. Really good chemistry. The bigs just really look great together. Zuby, Mitchell, Hopkins, 43 points together, 17 rebounds. And get this, they had St. John's 10 of their 25 assists. You gotta love that. I mean, big guys passing, and again, in a blowout game like that, they're sharing the ball. It is amazing. Dillon Mitchell, 18 points, 7 rebounds, 4 steals. Hi, Queens. My name is Dillon Mitchell. I'm here to play. My goodness. You want to talk about, funny, shout out Zach Brazil of the New York Post put out a predictions article, actually has Dillon Mitchell as his pick for the Haggerty Award, which is the best player in New York on a New York team and a local team. So that would be quite something, but he was great. Bryce Hopkins, while the numbers and the stat sheet might not look great, I thought 3 of Bryce's baskets were really eye-opening and great to see. They were 3 blow-bys to get to the rim. 1 was a layup, and 2 were just ferocious sophomore Bryce Hopkins type dunks, and they were important. And yet, after the game, I think Rick Pitino is treating Bryce Hopkins and Ian Jackson very similarly. He is still trying to push buttons. Pitino has said that he wants Mamba mentality out of Bryce Hopkins. He still wants him to do more. It's the same thing with Ian, and it's really interesting because they're your 2 prized possessions from the portal, and he is gonna, finger poke them until he gets exactly what he wants, and that's scary for the rest of the Big East and scary for the rest of this country, in my opinion.
When Bryce Hopkins was scoring 17 points and 7 rebounds a game at Providence, he looked every bit the All-American as a sophomore that he was expected to be out of high school,
Yeah.
right? 5-star recruit, All-American, the whole bit. I think that the biggest problem he's going to have is being that alpha dog on a team full of alpha dogs. And so I almost don't hold it against the kid because there's just so many guys that demand the ball and want to score. But you saw glimpses of it yesterday.
Yeah.
And there's going to be stretches, if not games, where Bryce Hopkins is the best player on the court and again wills this team to win with his hustle and his effort. And it's interesting because at Providence, he was playing the 4. Yesterday, he spent most of his time at the 3.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of small forwards have the difficult assignment of kind of keeping him in front, knowing that he's just going to kind of bully his way to the basket and do so with kind of grace and style.
I think that something that you said is important, and it's like he's kind of deferring a little bit. And I think that that's what Rick is also talking about. It's like he wants him to kind of be a killer, and yet it's almost like he realizes that, like, hey, I'm surrounded by so many guys that I can rely on and that I can, dish off to, that I don't have to be that yet. But again, it's like, do you want him to be a little bit more of a ball hog and kind of, again, it's all situational and all that. But in a game like yesterday where, the game's in hand and you have a little bit more leeway based on who you're playing, maybe that is the game that we see, kind of, I don't want to say the training wheels come off, but you kind of get what I mean. You want to see a little bit more. I think that we will. Then again, maybe he's saving himself for Alabama.
There's an opportunity there because Alabama, as good as they are on the perimeter, they've got size, they've got athleticism, but I think that most pundits would agree that our front court is superior to that of Alabama. For St. John's, just looking ahead for a second, for St. John's to be able to beat Alabama, even at home, that front court has to come out and dominate the game because those guards of Alabama, their perimeter is a really scary, threatening offense. They put up 91 points themselves in their home opener yesterday. This is going to be a battle, and this is going to be one of those games which we look back on and we say in many ways may have set the tone for the rest of the season if they come out of the Garden with a win.
Well, you say set the tone, and the guy that's setting the tone, it seems like for St. John's is indeed Dillon Mitchell. I mean, what he did on the court, the way that he was impacting both sides of the floor was incredible. And, for the 5,200 that were in Carnesec Arena yesterday, listen, not many are as diehard as us. Not many have been following Dillon Mitchell when he was at Texas, at Cincinnati, or knew kind of what he was really bringing to the table. So I'm sure for some people that was the first time seeing Dillon Mitchell, and they probably went, holy cow. I heard like people behind me were like, whoa, this is a guy to watch. You really like, so that was a coming out party essentially for Dillon Mitchell. But like, this guy has such a good head on his shoulders. He had 18 points and yet wasn't I think hunting for his shot at all. Really took the game as it came to him. And after the game, Dillon Mitchell said that he could not care less about his offense, that he's focused more on his defense leading to the offense. Mitchell to me is almost like a captain of this team. It feels like he just has that demeanor, and I love I love what I'm seeing from him. I can't wait to see what this guy does at Madison Square Garden against Alabama. We talked about it on our schedule show where I said I think Alabama, while they have an advantage at guard, I think their front court, like you mentioned, is a little bit lacking. And the way St. John's front court is playing, they are, I think, going to terrorize Alabama on Saturday. And I think that's going to lead to the win. Now, you mentioned Alabama had they got a win too, but I talked to a few people who were with the program. There's concern there. They didn't look great, even though they won by a bunch. They had 3 guys missing, which was important. Nate Oates did say that it's minor injuries, and their guards who didn't play, I think it was Holloway, Bethea, and one more, they should be back for Saturday against St. John's, which I certainly understand. But like, man, I can't wait for this game. 15 versus 5, Alabama, St. John's, the Garden, Nate Oates, Rick Pitino, friends. I mean, and this is something that Pitino, I think, has been trying to get this Alabama game on the schedule for like 3 years at this point.
Yeah, this is the one we've all circled on the calendar. I agree with something you said in the kind of the schedule review episode, which is that Kentucky is the marquee game on the schedule, maybe the marquee game for any team
Yeah.
in the country. I agree with that. But the first game against a big time opponent, just 1 week into the season, this is the one I've had circled on my calendar because, Florida took a loss, right? They're number 3 in the country. They lost to a very good Arizona team. A loss here doesn't kill St. John's. Let's be clear about that. But a win just kind of propels them into that Las Vegas tournament where they're going to have 3 very tough games in 3 days. I'm very excited. I'm nervous, but I'm excited. And at the end of the day, I do think that they're going to come out with a W in a close game. You predicted a W, earlier in the year. Do you stand by that?
Yeah, I do. And to your point, the results of this game shifts the narrative and the conversation for the next few weeks around St. John's. They win. St. John's is very, 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 very for real. They just beat a number 15 team in the country. And with all the hype of being a number 5 team in the country to start the year, it gets so solidified. And, depending on what happens, this week, next week, starts some really big games around the country. That helps you move up. That helps you with quad 1 wins. Yes, we're still talking about those. That helps you everywhere. Now they lose, and it's like, all right, your first major test, you lost against Michigan. People are going to start bringing up exhibition games. Then you get a test against Alabama. You drop that one. Which team is the real St. John's? Is it the one that scored 108 against a MAC team, or is it the team that couldn't get it done against Alabama? That's how the conversation is going to go from some talking heads. Now, most people will agree with what you just said, Justin, is that a loss doesn't kill you. It just changes the kind of conversation that you're going to have. A few more things before we put a bow on Alabama, which we will in a second here. Tom Pecora, Quinnipiac coach, said that St. John's came out and played like the top 10 team in the country. Always good to hear another coach really praise what you've got. And I love that. 42% from 3, as I mentioned, 8 of 19. Efficient from the floor, 56.5% from the floor, 25 assists on 39 made shots, 22 of 34 from the line. You mentioned that, sticking point. but some more good things. 60 points in the paint, 44 points on fast breaks. And again, this is all with limited guard play. All good stuff. Positive, happy to hear. St. John's led the game by 45 points towards the end of the game, 102-57. And again, the 108 points were the most St. John's has scored since 2021. Justin, Rick Pitino is trying to get this St. John's team ready for the long haul. It's a long season. The next 5 months are going to be insane. This is the first big one of the season, of the regular season. Alabama and Nate Oates are psychotic because their next 4 games are number 5 St. John's, number 1 at home against Purdue, on the road against number 11 Illinois, and then they're in Vegas against number 21 Gonzaga. Nate Oates said, I don't know what our record is going to be after the 4. That doesn't really concern me as much as getting better every game. You know, he sounds like Rick Pitino, honestly. So that's kind of what we're up against. A team that St. John's will play very fast, wants to shoot it, kind of has that Mike D'Antoni style where they're going to get into their offense really quickly and let it go. St. John's has to be ready for it. Their defense has to be ready for it. Those guards got to be able to pick up probably right after half court. Don't give up the 3. And then we see what happens, man. It's a very exciting game. 12 o'clock, Madison Square Garden. I can't wait.
So the complete antithesis of the Michigan game where you're worried about those bigs. Now, the pace of this game may be unlike any other. And if the teams are efficient in their offense, you could be looking at a game that, you know, was a 90-88 game just because of the pace and the number of shots that go up. I'm excited. I do think they come away with the win. But I will say that a B- effort is not going to get it done. They have to play an A- game to win this to win this game. And I'm not even saying comfortably. I'm saying just getting out of the Garden with a 1-point win is not going to be easy. But you know, think about Nate Oates and think about that Alabama team. They're looking at this St. John's roster and they're saying, how do we contain this front court? How do we deal with the depth when they're playing 9, 10, maybe even 11 guys? It's going to be fascinating, and I cannot wait to see what happens on Saturday.
This is that first game that we talked about this preseason that, like, understand that like the way that we're talking about Alabama is talking about us. The way St. John's fans are talking about Alabama fans are talking about St. John's for the first time in a very, very long time, since probably the end of last season. You know, you take last season from January on to now, St. John's is the hunted. And that's a very different position that St. John's is used to for a fan base, not for this coaching staff anymore. I think they like it. I think the way that the senior leadership on this team, that I think Sadiku is a huge part of that. There is a confidence within these guys. They are not looking ahead. I think they're very media trained in what they've been saying to the cameras. But I think they really believe it. And I think there's a really good group here. It's going to be really, really interesting. And Justin, just final thoughts. I mean, after Monday night's home opener where St. John's wins and going away comfortably 108-74, how are you feeling just in general about the team and going into this Alabama game?
Very cautiously optimistic. And I say that because I could easily see any team losing to Alabama, right? Like I could see Purdue losing to Alabama. It would not shock me. If they are hitting their shots and they hit 43% of their threes, it's going to be very hard to beat with the pace they play at. But at the same time, I don't hate the matchup. There are matchups on this roster, or on this schedule, I should say, that I am not a fan of. This is one of those matchups which I do think that the pressure could be a problem, but I don't know that Alabama's defense is where it needs to be able to pressure the St. John's guards and turn them over. I found it interesting in their last game, North Dakota only turned it over 10 times. 10 times. And so as good as those guards are, they're not really pressuring the ball, or at least they didn't seem to pressure the ball as much in their opener. Maybe they're saving it for Madison Square Garden, but at the end of the day, I think that there's enough pieces on this team that they'll find a way to win.
I think this is one of those games. You've heard Rick Pitino say, we were looking for our weaknesses against Towson. We were looking for our weaknesses against Michigan. We wanted to know what to work on. So in a sense, regardless of the results here, you're going to see things about your team that are going to help you moving forward, are going to help you into Las Vegas. that they'll be able to work on in that William and Mary game the following Saturday. That's what this schedule is about. You're getting tested. There's no more 11-0 Mike Anderson cupcake schedules that don't reveal anything about your character and about your players and about the style overall. We're not in Kansas anymore, as they say. It's St. John's, it's Alabama. It is Saturday, high noon, the place to be. It's the hottest ticket in town. Johnny Nation, I hope you show up. I hope you are rocking the right color of red, no crimson around these here parts. And Justin, I know you're raring to go. Johnnies start the season 1-0. Absolutely looking like a top 5 team in the country. Buckle up, Johnny fans. The first real test is on the way. I will see you at Madison Square Garden, 12 o'clock. NATO, it's Rick Pitino, St. John's against Alabama, number 5 against number 15. Johnny Nation, thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.